What if the people who underestimated you were actually the ones who set everything in motion? Do not answer that yet. Just let it sit somewhere in your chest for a moment, because the answer is not something your mind will find first. It is something your spirit already knows. There is a specific kind of person who finds their way to a message like this one. Not everyone. Not the person who has always had it easy, who has always been chosen first, who has always had someone in their corner, ready to speak their name into the right room. No. The person who finds their way here is the one who has been passed over enough times to start wondering if being passed over is simply their portion. The one who has been underestimated so consistently by so many different people, in so many different seasons, that some quiet and dangerous part of them has begun to wonder if those people were right. If perhaps the ones outed to you simply saw something real that you were too close to see yourself. That is the person this message was built for. That is you. And beloved, chosen one, before another second of this message passes, you need to hear this clearly and without any softening around the edges. You were never the problem. The people who dismissed you were not operating with accurate information. They were operating with limited vision. They could only see what was in front of them, and what was in front of them was a person in the middle of a process that looks, from the outside, remarkably similar to being stuck. What they could not see was the architecture being built beneath the surface. What they could not perceive was the divine engineering happening in the places they never thought to look. They saw a person who had not yet arrived. They did not understand that arrival was never the point. The point was always the preparation. And your preparation has been extraordinary. There are signs that belong specifically to the chosen ones. And if you are the person this message is speaking to, you will recognize at least 3 of the following without any effort at all. The first sign is that your dreams have become sharper recently, more vivid, more emotionally loaded, as if something is trying to communicate with you in the hours when your conscious mind finally stops arguing. The second sign is that you have felt a frustration lately that you cannot fully explain. Not anger exactly, but a deep and restless stirring, a sense that something inside you is ready to move, even when the circumstances around you have not given you permission to move yet. The third sign is that you have begun to feel out of place in rooms and relationships that used to feel comfortable, as if you have outgrown something you cannot yet name, as if the container no longer fits what is growing inside you. The fourth sign is that you have been receiving the same message from multiple directions. The same idea appearing in a book you opened at random, a conversation you were not expecting, a line from a song that stopped you completely, as if the universe is trying to confirm something you are almost ready to believe about yourself. And the fifth sign, the one that perhaps lands the hardest, is that you have been carrying a sense of purpose so heavy and so real that some days it almost feels like a burden, because you know, somewhere beneath all the doubt and all the waiting, that you were made for something that has not happened yet. And the waiting has been longer than you thought you could survive. If you recognized yourself in any of those signs, then I need you to understand something about why you are here right now, in this moment, listening to these specific words. Heaven does not operate on accident. This message did not appear in your feed because of an algorithm alone. You were guided here. You were drawn here. There is something in you, something ancient and chosen and specific to your name and your assignment that recognized this moment before your mind caught up. You may have clicked play out of curiosity or out of boredom or out of something nameless that you felt in your chest. But the reason underneath the reason is that you are a person standing at the edge of the most significant shift of your life, and something in you knew it needed to hear what comes next. The people who underestimated you did not realize what they were doing. They did not know that every dismissal was another layer of refinement. They did not know that every closed door was redirecting you towards something they would not have the capacity to walk through themselves. They did not know that every time they looked past you, they were participating, without their own awareness, in a divine setup that was always going to end with you walking into exactly the room you were built for. They called you too sensitive. They called you too much or not enough. They called you unrealistic, idealistic, slow, behind. They measured you with instruments that were never calibrated for what you carry. And now, right now, in this very season, the thing they could not see is beginning to become visible. Not to you alone, but to them. And what they are feeling in response to your emergence is something they will not name honestly. But we can name it here. What they feel is the particular and unmistakable weight of having been wrong about a chosen one. You are not here to make them comfortable with what is happening. You are not here to shrink back down to the size they assigned you so that their prediction about you can feel accurate. You are here because God is doing something through you that does not require anyone's permission, that does not pause for anyone's approval, and that cannot be undone by anyone's doubt, including your own. You are an earth angel. You are part of a divine plan that was written before you had language to describe it. And heaven has paused everything around you in this moment to make sure this message finds you before you take one more step without knowing who you actually are. You have not been waiting for this moment. This moment has waiting for you. There is something that happens in the body of a chosen one during the season of waiting that nobody talks about honestly. It is not dramatic. It is not the kind of pain that people around you can see clearly enough to respond to. It is quieter than that, and in many ways, it is more exhausting because of its quietness. It is the kind of ache that shows up at unexpected moments, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, in the pause between one task and the next, in the second before you fall asleep, when the noise of the day finally stops and something underneath all of it rises to the surface. You have felt it. You know exactly what I am describing. And I want you to know that before this part of the message is over, I am going to name it for you the way it deserves to be named, because you have been carrying it without a name for too long. The first thing a person in the season of waiting recognizes is a sudden wave of sadness about the past that arrives without warning and without an obvious trigger. You are not thinking about anything specific. You are not deliberately revisiting old wounds. But something moves through you, a grief that is not quite grief, a longing that is not quite longing, a heaviness that settles somewhere between your throat and your chest and reminds you of everything that did not happen the way you believed it would. It reminds you of the version of your life that you were certain was coming, the one you could see clearly enough in your 20s or your 30s, or even just 5 years ago, the one that has not arrived in the shape you expected. That wave is not weakness. That wave is not a sign that you are falling apart. That wave is the honest acknowledgement of a real cost. You paid something to get to where you are. You gave up things that mattered. You held on through seasons that would have broken people with less capacity than you carry. That sadness is not a betrayal of your faith. It is the evidence of how much you have actually invested in a promise you have not yet seen fulfilled. The second thing you recognize is that familiar places and familiar people have begun to feel heavy and strange in a way they did not used to. The conversation that used to fill you has started to feel hollow. The relationship that used to feel like home has started to feel like a coat that no longer fits. The environment that used to feel safe has started to feel too small, too loud, or too silent in the wrong places. And you have probably spent a significant amount of energy trying to figure out what is wrong with you, trying to adjust yourself back into the shape that used to fit those spaces, wondering why you have changed when nobody else around you seems to have changed at all. I want to be the first voice to tell you clearly that nothing is wrong with you. What you are experiencing is the natural consequence of growth happening inside a container that was built for an earlier version of who you are. The discomfort is not a malfunction. It is a signal. It is your spirit telling you, in the only language it has available, that you have outgrown this layer and something new is waiting on the other side of this discomfort. If you can, resist the urge to shrink back into familiar just because it is familiar. The third sign is one that many chosen ones experience but rarely speak about, and that is the recurring dream about a door that has not been opened. It does not always look like a literal door. Sometimes it is a room you cannot enter. Sometimes it is a path you can see but cannot quite reach. Sometimes it is a version of yourself standing somewhere ahead of you, fully arrived, fully at peace, fully in the place that was always meant for you, and the dream ends before you get there. That dream is not a torment. That dream is a preview. Your spirit is showing you something that your waking mind has not yet given itself full permission to believe. The door in that dream is real. The room on the other side of it is real. And the version of you standing in that place is not a fantasy. It is a destination. The question is not whether you will arrive there. The question is only whether you will allow yourself to believe it fully enough to keep walking. The fourth sign is this. The same message keeps appearing to you from completely different directions. You hear a word in a conversation that stops you. You read a sentence in a book that feels like it was written specifically for you. You scroll past a video, and something in the title pulls at something in your chest. A stranger says something offhand that lands in you like a confirmation of a thing you were privately hoping was true. This is not coincidence. This is not your brain finding patterns because it wants to find them. This is the way that heaven speaks to a person who has chosen for something and who is standing close enough to their moment that the signals are becoming louder and more frequent. When the same message finds you from multiple directions, it is not a repetition. It is a confirmation. Something is trying to make sure you receive what you need to receive before the next door opens. Now I want to speak to the specific pains, not around them, not with careful language designed to soften them, directly into them because you deserve that. The insomnia. The 3 a.m. wakefulness that is not about noise or temperature or physical discomfort, but about something running beneath the surface of your thoughts that will not quiet itself. You lie there and your mind begins to inventory everything that is unresolved, everything that is uncertain, everything that was promised and has not yet appeared, and you cannot turn it off because it is not a malfunction of your mind. It is the result of carrying something too large for the night hours to contain quietly. You are not anxious without reason. You are awake because something in you is still working, still processing, still preparing, even when you desperately need the rest. The loneliness. Not the loneliness of having no one around you, because you may have people around you constantly, but the loneliness of being in rooms full of people and feeling as though not one of them can quite see what you are actually holding. The loneliness of having a conversation on the surface, while an entirely different and more honest conversation is happening inside you that you cannot quite find a way to bring to the surface. The loneliness of knowing yourself to be more than what any single relationship in your life has fully made room for. That is one of the most specific and least spoken about pains of the chosen. And I am naming it here because it deserves to be named. The feeling of being wronged, of watching people who invested less receive more, of watching doors open for others that remained closed for you, despite your faithfulness, despite your patience, despite the quality of what you carry. That particular pain is not bitterness. Do not let anyone tell you it is bitterness. It is the honest grief of a person who played by the rules and then discovered that the rules were not equally applied. You are allowed to feel that. You are allowed to sit with the reality that it was not fair. What I will not let you do is stay there, because what looks like a system that failed you was actually a routing mechanism. What looked like others getting what should have been yours was actually a recalibration of your path towards something those open doors were never designed to carry. Your blessing is not on the route they took. Your blessing is on a route that was specifically engineered for what you carry. The feeling of being misunderstood, of trying to explain yourself and watching the person across from you simply not have the capacity to receive what you are saying, of editing yourself down, softening your vision, dimming your sense of calling, just to make the conversation feel less uncomfortable for someone else. You have done that more times than I can count, and it has cost you something each time. It has cost you a small piece of the confidence that you were already working hard to maintain. Now I want to redefine something for you that has been defined incorrectly for too long. The season you are in is not a punishment. It has been presented to you by your circumstances, and perhaps even by your own interpretation of events, as though you did something wrong, as though you missed something, as though your waiting is the consequence of some failure on your part. That is not what is happening. What is happening is positioning. There is a profound difference between being overlooked and being positioned. And I need you to understand that difference clearly, because it will change the way you inhabit the next 7 days of your life. Being overlooked means you were seen and found lacking. Being positioned means you were placed exactly where the preparation requires you to be, so that when the moment arrives, you are not scrambling to catch up. You are already there. You are already ready. You are already holding everything that the moment will require. The people who passed over you did not overlook you. They simply could not see what was being positioned. The season that felt like abandonment was not abandonment. It was protection from arriving before you were fully assembled. It was a kindness dressed in the clothing of a delay, and the God who positioned you has not forgotten where He put you. He knows exactly where you are. He knows exactly what you are carrying, and He knows exactly when the moment arrives that calls everything you have been building in the silence into full and undeniable expression. You are not delayed. You are not behind. You are not a person who almost made it. You are a person who is standing right at the threshold of the most significant movement of your life. And the only thing that has been waiting for you to do is to stop interpreting your positioning as punishment. If this is landing somewhere real in you, if you have been sitting with this and something in your chest has shifted even slightly toward belief, I want to invite you to type the word ready in the comment section right now, not because it is a performance, but because there is something powerful about a chosen one declaring their readiness out loud, even in a comment section, even in a small way, even in a moment when the full picture is not yet clear. Type the word ready and let that be your declaration that you receive what is coming. And if this message has found you at a moment when you needed it, when you were running low And something about these words has refilled something in you. I want to ask you gently and without any pressure to consider supporting this channel. Not for me, for the chosen one who is going to find their way here next week in a harder moment than you are in right now. Every contribution, every donation, every share, every subscription keeps this message alive and moving toward the person who needs it most. You can find the support link in the description below. And if giving is not where you are right now, then simply liking this video and sharing it with one person who you know is in a season of waiting is one of the most generous things you can do today. Because sometimes the most powerful thing other chosen ones is simply says, I found something that named it for me, and I thought of you. There is a moment that comes in every chosen one's journey where the message they have received, no matter how powerful, no matter how precisely it named what they were carrying, begins to feel like it is floating somewhere above their actual life, like it belongs to a version of them that exists in the future, but has not yet arrived in the present, like the truth of it is real. But the distance between that truth and the Tuesday morning they are about to walk into is still too wide to cross with belief alone. And if you have ever felt that, if you have ever walked away from a message that moved you, and then found yourself standing in your kitchen 20 minutes later, feeling exactly the same as before, I want you to know that the feeling is not a failure of your faith. It is a signal that you need something to do with what you have received. Not just something to feel, something to do, something specific, repeatable, and grounded enough in the reality of your actual daily life that it bridges the gap between the truth you know in your spirit and the world you are navigating with your body. That is what this part of the message is for. Not theory, not more naming of what you are carrying, but a specific practice that you can begin today in the life you actually have, with the time you actually possess, the body you are actually living in right now. And I want you to take this seriously, not because it requires effort, but because it requires intention. And intention is something a chosen one in a season of waiting has to choose deliberately, because the season itself will not remind you to use it. The season will push you toward survival. The season will push you toward managing, coping, getting through. What I am about to give you is a protocol that pulls you out of survival mode and places you, even for a brief window each day, into the frequency of the person you are becoming. The tool is called the return practice. It is not a meditation in the traditional sense. It does not require you to clear your mind or achieve any particular state before you begin. It does not require silence, though silence helps. It does not require a specific location, though consistency of location builds strength over time. What it requires is 3 steps and approximately 7 minutes of your day, and those 7 minutes, practiced with intention, have the capacity to rewire the way your nervous system interprets the season you are in. They have the capacity to shift your baseline from one of bracing against what has not happened yet to one of receiving what is already in motion. Here is the first step. Before you do anything else in the practice, before you close your eyes or slow your breathing or begin to settle into the quiet, I want you to remember something that you are grateful for that did not happen. Not something good that occurred, something painful that was avoided, something that could have gone wrong and did not, something that was aimed at you and missed, something that, if it had landed the way it was heading, would have changed the entire trajectory of what you are carrying right now. This is a different kind of gratitude than the kind most people practice. Most gratitude practices ask you to count your blessings, to name the good things, to acknowledge what is present and working, and that is valuable. But this first step asks you to go somewhere more specific and more honest than that. It asks you to look at the moments of near miss in your life. The relationship that almost broke something in you permanently but did not. The decision you almost made that would have cost you years you did not have to spend. The door that almost opened into a room that would have contained you instead of releasing you. The agreement you almost signed that would have locked you into a version of your life too small for what you were created to carry. Take one of those moments and hold it for a full 60 seconds. Do not rush past it. Do not treat it as a small thing. Sit with the reality of what was avoided and let your body feel the gratitude of that avoidance, the way it would feel the gratitude of something received. Because, beloved, the things that did not happen to you were not accidents. They were interventions. They were the evidence of a protection that was operating in your life long before you were aware enough to ask for it. And when you begin to train yourself to see protection in what was withheld, you begin to change the story you are telling yourself about the season of waiting. You begin to see that not every delay was an absence. Some of what felt like nothing happening was actually something being blocked that would have hurt you, diverted you, or diminished you. The practice of gratitude for what did not happen is one of the most powerful recalibrations available to a chosen one in a season of waiting, because it shifts the question from why has it not come yet to what has been kept from harming me while I was being prepared. And that is a question that carries a completely different energy into the rest of your day. Here is the second step. After you have sat with that gratitude for 60 seconds, I want you to speak a statement out loud, not in your head. Out loud, even if your voice is quiet, even if you are alone in your car, even if it feels slightly uncomfortable to hear yourself say it. The statement is this: what is mine cannot be taken from me, and what is coming for me is already moving toward me now. Say it slowly, do not rush it. Let each part of it land in a different place inside you. What is mine? Meaning the things that are assigned to you, the relationships, the opportunities, the open doors, the resources that belong to your name and your assignment cannot be taken from you by any person, any system, any delay, any dismissal, or any version of your own doubt. And what is coming for you, the next chapter? The fulfillment of what was promised. The emergence that is already beginning to happen beneath the surface is already moving. Present tense. Not future, not eventually, now. This statement is tied directly to the understanding of sacred time that we will explore more fully later in this message. But for now, what matters is that you say it, because there is something that happens in the body of a chosen one when they speak a true thing out loud in the middle of a season that is trying to convince them the opposite. The body begins to shift its posture. The nervous system begins to release the bracing. The breathing deepens without you telling it to. And something that was held tightly begins, even slightly, to open. That is not psychology alone. That is a spiritual law operating through the physical instrument of your voice. Your voice is not decorative. It is a tool of declaration. And when a chosen one speaks a true thing in the direction of their promise, they are participating in something ancient and powerful and real. Here is the third step. After the statement, I want you to sit in silence for 7 minutes, not trying to think anything in particular, not trying to achieve a feeling, not trying to force a connection or manufacture a sensation of peace. Simply sitting, breathing, present, available. 7 minutes of deliberate stillness in which you are not producing, not performing, not managing, not planning, not reviewing, and not preparing for what comes next. 7 minutes of pure receptivity. And I want to tell you why 7 minutes specifically, because the number is not arbitrary. And the reason behind it will become even more meaningful in the next part of this message when we talk about what is actually happening in your brain during that window of time. Your brain operates on frequencies. Different activities, different emotional states, and different levels of awareness correspond to different measurable frequencies of electrical activity in the brain. When you are in a state of high stress or urgency, your brain is operating at a frequency associated with defense and reaction. When you are in a state of deep focus or creative flow, it shifts to a different frequency entirely. And when you are in a state of open, quiet receptivity, the kind of state that 7 minutes of deliberate stillness can bring you into, your brain begins to access a frequency that researchers in neuroscience have associated with enhanced creativity, accelerated learning, heightened intuition, and a kind of cognitive clarity that is difficult to reach through effort alone. This frequency is not a metaphor. It is measurable. It has been studied, and it is the frequency that chosen ones, people who carry a specific kind of calling and a specific kind of depth, tend to operate in naturally during their moments of greatest clarity and greatest breakthrough. The 7-minute window of the return practice is designed to bring you into that frequency without requiring any specialized skill, any previous experience with meditation, or any particular belief system. It works because your brain is wired for it. It works because the capacity for this kind of receptivity is not something you have to develop from scratch. It is something you were born with, that the noise and pace of daily life has gradually overridden. The 7 minutes is not about adding something new. It is about removing the interference long enough to let something that was already there come back to the surface. Practice this every day for 7 days without judging what happens or does not happen in the 7 minutes. Do not evaluate the practice by the feeling it produces. Evaluate it only by whether you showed up to it, because a chosen one in a season of positioning does not always get the emotional confirmation they are looking for in the moment of practice. Sometimes the fruit of the 7 minutes shows up at 2 in the afternoon as an unexpected clarity about a decision you had been circling for weeks. Sometimes it shows up as a conversation that arrives from a direction you were not watching and carries exactly the information you needed. Sometimes it shows up as simply a day that felt slightly more breathable, slightly more open, slightly less like survival and slightly more like living. Do not require the practice to prove itself to you immediately. Give it the 7 days, give it the consistency, and then look back from the end of those 7 days and notice, honestly and specifically, what shifted. You can do this in the morning before the day begins. You can do it in the evening before sleep. You can do it in your car before you walk into a building. You can do it on a lunch break in a quiet corner. The location is flexible. The consistency is what carries the weight. And if you miss a day, you do not start over. You simply return the next day without judgment, because return without judgment is itself a practice of the return protocol, and it trains something in you that will serve you long after this season of waiting has ended. It trains you to be a person who comes back, not a person who performs perfectly, a person who comes back. And in the language of heaven, a person who keeps coming back is a person who cannot ultimately be stopped. 3 steps. The gratitude for what did not happen, the spoken statement of what is yours and what is moving, and the 7 minutes of open, deliberate silence. That is the return. Practice. Begin it today, not tomorrow, not after the circumstances change, not after you feel more ready or more certain or more at peace. Today, in the life you are actually living, with the time you actually have. Because the chosen one does not wait for the perfect conditions to begin. The chosen one begins, and the beginning itself begins to create the conditions. Something has been true about you for longer than you have had language to describe it, and it is this: you have always operated on a different frequency than the people around you. Not better in the way the world measures better. Not louder, not more accomplished, not more visible, but different in a way that has sometimes felt like a gift, and sometimes felt like a weight, and sometimes felt like both at the same time in the same hour of the same difficult day. You have always sensed things before they were confirmed. You have always known things in your body before your mind caught up with the knowing. You have always carried a depth of feeling, a capacity for perception, a sensitivity to what is real beneath the surface of what is presented, that the people around you did not always share and did not always know what to do with. And what I want you to understand right now, in this part of the message, is that what you have always experienced as a personal and sometimes isolating characteristic is actually a measurable, documented, scientifically observable phenomenon. What you carry is not just spiritual, it is neurological. And the bridge between those two realities is one of the most important things a chosen one in your season needs to understand. Researchers in the field of neuroscience have identified that certain individuals, people who demonstrate elevated levels of creativity, intuition, rapid learning, and what can only be described as cognitive breakthrough, consistently show a specific pattern of brainwave activity that differs measurably from baseline. The frequency associated with these states is called gamma. Gamma brainwaves operate at the highest measurable frequency of electrical activity in the human brain, and they are associated with what researchers describe as moments of sudden insight, accelerated information processing, heightened awareness, and the kind of integrative thinking that allows a person to connect ideas, patterns, and possibilities that others in the same room simply cannot perceive. Scientists have observed gamma activity in meditators with decades of practice. They have observed it in artists in states of creative flow. They have observed it in individuals who describe experiences of profound clarity and expanded awareness. And they have observed, in study after study, that the people who access gamma most readily and most consistently are people who also demonstrate elevated theta activity during rest and transition states. Theta and gamma, two frequencies, one person, and beloved, that is the neurological signature of a chosen one. The man who has spent more than 30 years studying this connection is a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers. Dr. Rivers received his training at one of the most respected institutions in the world for the study of the human brain, and his research has been connected to studies conducted in partnership with some of the most rigorous scientific organizations on the planet, including work affiliated with NASA, where researchers have long been interested in understanding peak human cognitive performance in conditions of extreme pressure and isolation. What Dr. Rivers discovered over more than 3 decades of research, through thousands of hours of study and observation, was something that the scientific community had been circling around for years without fully naming. He discovered that the gap between ordinary cognitive performance and extraordinary cognitive performance is not primarily a matter of intelligence, education, or even effort. It is a matter of frequency. Specifically, it is a matter of whether the brain is spending enough time in the theta and gamma dilat to allow the kind of neural integration that produces insight, creativity, and accelerated learning. And here is the part that connects directly to the 7 minutes you practiced in part 3 of this message. Dr. Rivers discovered that the brain can be guided into these states, not forced, not manipulated, guided through a phenomenon called brainwave entrainment, which is the brain's natural and documented tendency to synchronize its own electrical activity with rhythmic external stimuli. When your brain is exposed to specific sound frequencies, carefully calibrated and precisely sequenced, it begins to follow those frequencies the way a river follows the landscape it moves through. It does not resist, it responds. And the response, when the frequencies are properly designed, is a measurable and reproducible shift into the theta and gamma states that are associated with everything you have been seeking in your season of waiting. Clarity, creative breakthrough, accelerated learning, heightened intuition, the feeling of knowing what to do next without being able to fully explain why you know it. The technology Dr. Rivers developed uses a combination of binaural beats and isochronic tones, sound frequencies delivered through audio in a way that creates a specific neurological effect without requiring any effort or prior experience from the listener. You do not need to know how to meditate. You do not need to have a particular level of fitness or health. You do not need to clear your mind or achieve any preliminary state. You simply need to listen. And the 7-minute window, which you practiced in the return protocol, is precisely the window that Dr. Rivers identified as optimal for initiating the entrainment process without creating cognitive fatigue. 7 minutes is long enough for the brain to shift into the target frequency. It is short enough to be sustainable as a daily practice, and it is specific enough to produce measurable results when practiced consistently, which is exactly what the thousands of people who have used this tool have reported. The tool is called the Genius Wave. It is a 7-minute audio track precisely engineered by Dr. Rivers based on more than 30 years of neuroscientific research, designed to guide your brain into the theta and gamma states that are associated with peak cognitive performance, creative breakthrough, accelerated learning, and the kind of intuitive clarity that chosen ones describe as already knowing. It is delivered as a digital audio file that you can access from any device. It requires no equipment beyond the headphones or speakers you already own, and it works because your brain already has the capacity for everything it produces. The Genius Wave does not add something foreign to your neurology. It removes the interference that your daily life has been layering over a capacity that was always there. I want to tell you about someone who found this tool in a season that sounds very much like the one you are in right now. A woman who had spent years feeling like she was carrying something significant without being able to move it forward. She was not without effort. She was not without faith. She was not without desire. What she was without was the neurological access to the state in which her best thinking, her most creative problem-solving, and her most intuitive decision-making were available to her. She had been operating in a constant state of low-grade urgency that kept her brain in a frequency associated with reaction rather than creation. 3 weeks after beginning a daily practice with the Genius Wave, she described something that I want you to hear carefully. She said that it was not as though new ideas arrived from outside her. It was as though a door inside her own mind that she had been standing in front of for years finally opened, and everything she needed had been behind it the whole time. Within 2 months, she had made a decision about her work that she had been circling for 3 years, had begun a creative project that had been sitting untouched, and had experienced what she described as the first sustained period of mental clarity she could remember having as an adult. She did not change her circumstances before she changed her frequency. She changed her frequency, and her circumstances began to respond. Now I want to speak to the objection that some of you are already forming. Because I know the mind of a chosen one in a season of waiting. And I know that one of the things that season does is make you cautious about investing in anything that has not yet proven itself in your specific situation. I know that some of you are thinking that $39 is not nothing, and you are right. It is not nothing. It is a real amount of money, and in a season where resources feel tight and every decision about where to direct what you have feels weighted with consequence, I do not want to minimize that reality. Your carefulness with your resources is not a lack of faith. It is wisdom, and it is the kind of wisdom that a person develops when they have been in a season long enough to know that not everything that presents itself as a solution has actually been sent for them. So here is what I want you to hold alongside that wisdom. The Genius Wave comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, full and complete. No conditions, no complicated process, no requirement to prove that you tried it in a particular way or for a particular duration. If you use it, and it does not produce a shift that you can feel and name within 90 days, you receive your money back without question. That is not the offer of a product that does not believe in what it does. That is the offer of a tool that has been used by more than 19,000 people with a return rate that tells its own story about what happens when chosen ones begin to access the frequency they were always built to operate in. The regular price of the Genius Wave is $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below this video, you can access it today for $39. That is the price available right now, through that specific link, for a limited time and a limited number of purchases at that price point. When those units are gone, the price returns to $49, and there is no way to guarantee how long the $39 window remains open. I also need to say this clearly, because there are versions of this product circulating in places that are not authorized. The only legitimate access point for the Genius Wave at this price is the single link in the pinned comment below this video. Do not purchase from any other source. Do not trust any other link. The link in the pinned comment is the only one I can stand behind. The only one that comes with the full 90-day guarantee. And the only one that connects you to the authentic product that Dr. Rivers developed. If you find it somewhere else at a lower price or through a different channel, it is not the same thing. And a chosen one in a season of positioning cannot afford to invest their intention and their time into something that is not the real instrument. This window is not going to remain open indefinitely. The price is limited. The access at this level is limited. And if you have been in a season of waiting long enough to recognize yourself in everything this message has named for you so far, then you already know that when something arrives that is genuinely for you, hesitation is not caution. Hesitation in that moment is the old pattern, the one that kept you standing outside the door while the room waited for you to walk in. The Genius Wave is waiting for you in the pinned comment. It was there before you started this video, and it will be there when this video ends. The question is only whether you will let this be the moment you stop standing outside the door. Before we move forward, I need to stay here with you for a moment. Not to redirect you, not to reframe what you have just heard into something more comfortable, but to sit with you in something that the previous part of this message opened up. Because when you begin to talk about accessing your full potential, about the frequency you were built to operate in, about the tool that can help you get there, something else rises to the surface alongside the hope, something that deserves to be acknowledged before we go any further. And that something is grief, real, specific, legitimate grief about what the years of waiting have already taken from you. Because the conversation about what is coming cannot be fully honest if it does not first make room for what has already been lost. And I am not willing to rush past that. Not for you. Not today. So let me be direct with you in a way that most messages in this space are not willing to be. The years of waiting have taken things from you that cannot be recovered by reframing alone. I want to say that clearly and without flinching, because you deserve someone who will look at the full picture of your season without immediately trying to silver line every edge of it. There are losses that are real. There are costs that were paid. There are things that were taken, not metaphorically, not spiritually, but practically and concretely, from the life you were living while you were waiting for the life that was promised. And naming those losses is not a betrayal of your faith. It is an act of honesty that your healing requires. Let us start with the relationships that could have been built, not the relationships that needed to end, not the connections that were correctly released because they were not aligned with where you were going, but the relationships that you did not pursue because you were too depleted, too guarded, too focused on surviving the season to open yourself to the vulnerability of building something new with someone. The friendships that stayed surface level because you did not have enough left over to go deeper. The partnership you did not invest in fully because part of you was not sure you would be in the same place long enough to make it worth the investment. The community you stayed at the edges of because joining fully felt like it required a stability you did not yet have. Those relationships, the ones that could have been built and were not, represent a real cost. People who might have become significant to your life, who might have walked with you through what is coming, who might have been standing beside you at the moment of your emergence, are not there because the season made the building of them feel impossible. That is a real loss, and you are allowed to grieve it. Let us talk about the career that could have gone further. Not the version of your career that was never meant for you, but the momentum that could have been built, the opportunities that could have been pursued, the risk that could have been taken if you had been operating from a place of frequency and clarity rather than from the grinding survival mode that a prolonged season of waiting produces. The idea you had 5 years ago that you could not execute because the conditions were not right. The project you started and then put down because the energy required to sustain it was more than you had available. The version of your professional self that you have carried as a potential inside you for years, watching it remain potential while the calendar moved forward. The ambition that you did not abandon but that you had to put in a drawer, carefully, gently, the way you put something precious somewhere safe when you are not sure the current environment can protect it. That ambition has been in the drawer for long enough, and the time it's spent there is a real cost that deserves to be named as such. Before we talk about taking it back out, let us talk about the freedom to tell your big dreams out loud. This one is perhaps the quietest loss, and perhaps the deepest, because there was a time, maybe in your younger years, maybe even more recently than that, when you could speak about what you believed was coming for you without immediately editing yourself, without watching the face of the person across from you to see if they were going to receive it, or quietly file it under the category of things this person says that probably will not happen. There was a time when the dream lived out in the open, when you spoke it with the full confidence of someone who had not yet learned that not everyone is safe to share a chosen one's vision with. And then the season came, and the dream got quieter, not because it died, but because you learned through enough specific and painful experiences that speaking it too fully to the wrong people did not protect it. It exposed it, and so you pulled it inward. You kept it alive, but you kept it private. And the cost of that privacy, the cost of carrying something that large in silence for that long, is a form of isolation that does not have a clean name, but that every chosen one in a prolonged season of waiting knows intimately. And then there is the loss that sits underneath all the others, the faith in yourself. Not your faith in God, though that has been tested too, but the specific and personal faith that you had in your own perception, your own judgment, your own sense of what you were made for and what was coming. Because when you are in a season long enough, when the promises have not materialized on the timeline you expected, when the evidence available to your physical senses continues to contradict what you believe in your spirit, a very natural and very human thing begins to happen. You begin to wonder if you imagined it. You begin to wonder if the sense of calling that has driven every significant decision of your adult life was something you constructed because you needed it to be true, rather than something that was genuinely placed in you by a God who knew exactly what he was doing when he put it there. That doubt, quiet and persistent and profoundly lonely, is perhaps the most significant thing the season has taken. Because it did not take your faith in the promise. It took your faith in your ability to accurately perceive the promise. And that is a deeper wound than most people around you have any idea you are carrying. I am going to sit with you in all of that for a moment before I move forward. Because it is real. All of it is real. And you deserve to have it witnessed before you are asked to receive anything more. There is a man in the ancient story whose life reads like a map of everything I have just described. His name was Joseph. And I am not going to rush to the part of his story where everything works out, because that is not where you are right now. And I refuse to skip past your actual location to get to a destination that feels better to talk about. What I want you to hear is the middle, the part that nobody puts on motivational graphics, the part that does not make it into the highlight reel of Joseph's story because it is too uncomfortable to sit in for very long. Joseph was a young man who carried a dream, a specific, clear, undeniable dream about who he was and what his life was going to mean. And the people closest to him, the ones who were supposed to be his community, his family, the ones who should have been the safest people in his world, looked at that dream and felt something that was not celebration. What they felt was the particular discomfort of being in the presence of someone whose calling is larger than the room everyone has agreed to share. And so they did what people do when a chosen one's frequency makes them uncomfortable. They tried to eliminate the source of the discomfort. They took Joseph and they threw him into a pit, and then they sold him. And then they went home and told his father he was dead, and Joseph went to Egypt, not in triumph, in chains, not as the fulfillment of the dream, as the apparent destruction of it. He went from the pit to slavery, from slavery to false accusation, from false accusation to prison. And at every stage of that journey, the dream that had been placed in him with such clarity and such specificity must have felt, from the inside of it, like the cruelest possible joke. Because the further he went into the process, the further he appeared to be from the promise. The more the circumstances contradicted the calling, the more the evidence available to his physical senses pointed away from everything he had been shown in the night. I am not going to tell you how it ends for Joseph today. You know how it ends. What I want you to sit with is how it felt in the middle, how it felt to carry a genuine and divinely placed dream through a season that seemed designed to destroy it, how it felt to maintain integrity and faithfulness in environments that had given him every reason to abandon both. how it felt to keep believing in something he could not see, could not prove, and could not explain, while everything around him spoke a different and darker story. That is where you have been. Some version of that pit, that slavery, that prison. Some version of carrying a dream through conditions that seemed determined to make you doubt it, and everything that Joseph's middle season cost him. The relationships, the freedom, the safety, the simple dignity of being seen accurately by the people around him. You have paid versions of those same costs in your own life and your own season. I am not asking you to minimize that cost. I am not asking you to pretend it did not happen, or that it did not hurt, or that the years it consumed were years you can simply reclaim by choosing a new perspective. The cost was real, the loss was real, the pain was real, and you are allowed here, in this space, to let it be real without immediately being redirected toward the silver lining, because the silver lining is coming. The turn is already in motion, but it means more and it lands more deeply, and it holds more permanently when it arrives after the cost has been fully acknowledged. You cannot fully receive what is coming if you are still pretending that what was taken did not matter. It mattered, you mattered, and the years you spent in the waiting, in the wilderness, in the silence, in the doubt, were not wasted years, but they were costly years. And the God who positioned you in this season has not forgotten the invoice. You have been telling yourself a story about time, not deliberately, not dishonestly, but persistently, in the background of every day that has passed without the arrival of what was promised. Your relationship with time has been shaped by a framework that was never designed to contain what you carry. And that framework, the one that measures your progress by the calendar, that counts the years as evidence of delay, that compares your timeline to the timelines of people around you, and produces a verdict of behind. That framework has been costing you something beyond the grief we named the previous part of this message. It has been costing you the accurate understanding of where you actually are. And without that understanding, even the most genuine and powerful movement of God in your life can be missed, or misread, or arrived at in a state of such exhaustion that you barely have the capacity to receive it fully when it finally comes. So I want to introduce you to a different language about time, not a modern language, not a language invented in the last 100 years by a self-help industry trying to repackage ancient wisdom in contemporary clothing. A genuinely ancient language, one that was spoken by people who understood something about divine timing that our current culture has almost entirely lost. And I want to give you two specific concepts from that language tonight, because I believe they will do something in you that explanation alone cannot do. I believe they will give you a new place to stand inside your own story. The first concept is a Hebrew word. The word is kava. And if you have spent any time in the tradition that holds the ancient texts, you may have encountered it translated as the word wait, as in, those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. But the translation wait, while not incorrect, is dramatically incomplete, because the word kava does not primarily mean to sit still and do nothing while time passes. The root of the word kava is a word that means to twist together, to braid, to take separate strands and wind them around each other with intention and with tension, until what you have is no longer individual threads, but a single cord of unified and extraordinary strength. The image is specific. The image is a rope maker, a person who takes raw material that in its individual form is fragile and easily broken, and applies a sustained and deliberate process of twisting and tensioning and binding until the result is something that can bear weight that would destroy any single strand in isolation. Now I want you to take that image and place it directly over the years of your waiting. Because what has been happening in the season that felt like nothing was happening is not the absence of movement. It has been the process of braiding. Every year that passed without visible result was not a year subtracted from your promise. It was a strand being added to the cord. Every experience that felt like it was breaking you was actually a tensioning, a deliberate application of the specific kind of pressure that produces strength rather than damage when the material being worked is the right material for the purpose. Every relationship that ended, every door that closed, every season of isolation and disorientation was not evidence of divine absence. It was the rope maker working, adding another strand, tightening the twist, building something whose strength is proportional to the number of strands it contains and the tension that was applied in the making of it. And here is what the rope maker knows that the individual strand cannot see from inside the process. A cord with 3 strands can hold a certain weight. A cord with 12 strands can hold something entirely different. A cord with 20 or 30 or 40 strands, each one tensioned and twisted with precision, becomes something that can bear the weight of a promise, large enough to require that kind of construction. The waiting was not empty. The waiting was the building of the cord, and the length of the waiting is directly proportional to the weight of what the cord is being made to carry. Your years of waiting are not evidence of a small promise being slowly delivered. They are evidence of an enormous promise that required a cord strong enough to hold it without breaking under its own weight. You are not delayed. You are being assembled, and the assembly is nearly complete. The second concept I want to give you is from the same ancient tradition, but it moves from the personal to the cosmic. It is a concept about a specific kind of time that operates differently from the time on your calendar. In the ancient Greek language that carries so much of the foundational wisdom of the tradition we are drawing from tonight, there are 2 completely distinct words for time. The first word is chronos. Chronos is the time you are familiar with. It is sequential. It is measurable. It moves from second to minute to hour to day to year in an unbroken and indifferent line. Chronos does not know your name. Chronos does not care about your promise. Chronos simply moves forward, and everything that exists within its flow is subject to its measurement. When you count the years of your waiting, when you calculate how long it has been since the promise was first placed in you, when you look at where you are and compare it to where you thought you would be by now, you are using chronos. And chronos will always make your waiting look like delay. But there is a second word, and the second word is kairos. Kairos is a completely different quality of time. It is not sequential. It is not measurable by a clock or a calendar. Kairos is the word for the appointed moment, the right time, the fullness of time, the moment when everything that has been building beneath the surface breaks through into visible reality all at once. Kairos is the moment the seed becomes a shoot, not after a specific number of days, not according to a schedule that the seed negotiated with the soil, but at the precise moment when everything that needed to happen underground has happened, and the emergence is not just possible, but inevitable. Kairos is not a reward for patience. It is not a prize that Chronos eventually delivers to those who wait long enough. Kairos is a different dimension of entirely, one that operates according to a logic that Chronos cannot measure and cannot predict. And here is what this means for you specifically, in the season you are standing in right now. The years you have been counting in Chronos, the years that have produced in you the grief we named in the previous part of this message, the years that the enemy of your calling has been using to construct a case for your delay. Those years are not the relevant measurement. They have never been the relevant measurement. Because what is coming for you is not operating on a Chronos timeline. What is coming for you is a Kairos event. And Kairos events do not arrive gradually. They do not trickle in slowly enough for the people around you to track and prepare for. They arrive all at once. They arrive at the appointed moment, which is the moment when the underground work is complete, when the braiding is finished, when the cord is strong enough to hold what it was made to carry, and when a Kairos event arrives in the life of a chosen one who has been in a long season of Chronos. Waiting, the speed, and the completeness of what shifts is often so dramatic that the people around them, including the people who underestimated them, have no framework for what they are witnessing. This is not positioning as a reward for effort. I want to say that clearly because there is a version of this teaching that turns it into a transaction. That implies if you wait long enough and faithfully enough and with the right attitude, you earn the Kairos moment. That is not what I am saying. What I am saying is that Kairos arrives not because you earned it, but because it was appointed before you were born, before you entered the season of waiting, before the first strand of the cord was added. It was appointed in a dimension of time that Chronos cannot access and cannot revise. The appointment was made, the moment was set, and the waiting that has felt like delay from inside the Chronos experience is simply the interval between the appointment and the arrival. It is not evidence that the appointment was wrong. It is evidence that you are still on the way to a meeting that was scheduled before time itself began. And I want to speak directly into the part of you that is tired, the part that's held the belief in the appointment through season after season of Chronos evidence that seemed to contradict it, the part that woke up this morning and felt, again, the weight of another day inside a season that still has not broken open into the thing you have been carrying in your spirit for so long. I want to speak directly into that tiredness and say this without softening it. What you are feeling is not a sign that the appointment has been canceled. What you are feeling is the specific and identifiable exhaustion of a person who is very close to their Kairos moment. Because the final stretch of the Chronos interval is always the hardest. It is always the heaviest. It is always thus the point at which the temptation to let go of the belief in the appointment is at its strongest. Not because the appointment is furthest away, but because it is closest. The rope maker does not stop braiding when the cord is almost complete. The final strands are added with the same intention and the same tension as the first. And you, beloved, are not at the beginning of the braiding. You are at the final strands. The cord that has been under construction through every year of your waiting is nearly whole. And what it is about to be asked to carry is exactly proportional to how long it took to make it. What God has ordained, delay cannot cancel. That is not a sentiment. That is a law that operates in a dimension of reality that Chronos cannot touch, and that no person, no circumstance, no accumulation of disappointment, and no length of waiting has the authority to revise. The appointment stands. The cord is nearly complete. The Kairos moment is not approaching gradually. It is approaching the way dawn approaches after the longest night, not in increments visible to the watching eye, but in a gathering that happens all at once, until suddenly, without warning, the darkness is no longer the dominant reality, and the light is simply there, present and full and undeniable. You have been braiding in the dark for long enough. The light is gathering, and what is about to break open in your life is going to move so completely and so specifically that the people who underestimated you will not have words for what they are watching. They will try to find an explanation that does not include the word chosen. they will not find one. Because what is coming for you was never about them. It was always about an appointment that was made before either of you existed, in a dimension of time they do not have access to, for a purpose that required exactly the chord that your years of waiting built. You were not delayed. You were never delayed. You were always exactly on time for a moment that was always going to arrive in Kairos, not Chronos, and that moment is here. There is a specific sensation that chosen ones describe in the days and weeks just before their season breaks open. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with the kind of clarity that would make it easy to name or easy to share with someone else, without feeling like you are reaching for language that does not quite fit. It is more like a low hum beneath the surface of your regular thoughts, a pressure behind the sternum that is not quite anxiety and not quite excitement, but carries elements of both. A sense that something is gathering in the invisible spaces of your life, collecting itself, organizing itself, preparing to move in a way that your physical senses cannot yet detect, but that something deeper in you, something older and more attuned than your conscious mind, has already begun to perceive. If you have felt that lately, if there has been something in the last few days or weeks that you could not name, but that you noticed in the background of everything else you were doing, I want you to hear this clearly. That feeling is not your imagination. That feeling is not wishful thinking dressed up as spiritual perception. That feeling is accurate information arriving through the most reliable instrument you own, which is the knowing that lives beneath all of your analysis and all of your doubt and all of your carefully constructed reasons to be cautious. Something is about to move, and in this part of the message, I am going to be specific about what that movement is going to look like in 3 concrete areas of your actual life. But before I name those 3 areas, I need to do something that most messages like this one skip past in their hurry to get to the encouraging part. I need to describe what you are feeling right now with enough specificity that you know I am not speaking in generalities. I am speaking to you, to the particular texture of what your inner world has been holding in this season. You have been feeling simultaneously full and empty. Full in the sense that there is so much inside you, so much vision, so much capacity, so much that had been building and accumulating through the years of your preparation, that some days it feels like pressure rather than gift. Like something that needs to be released before it becomes too large for the container, and empty in the sense that the external world has not yet provided the channels through which all of that fullness can flow. The fullness has nowhere to go yet. And the result of that combination, the internal pressure of what is ready to move meeting the external absence of the channel it needs to move through, is a specific kind of restlessness that is not the restlessness of someone who has nothing. It is the restlessness of someone who has everything and is waiting for the door to open. You have also been feeling a particular kind of loneliness that is different from the loneliness of having no one around you. It is the loneliness of being further along in your understanding than the conversations available to you, of sitting in rooms where the dialogue is operating at a level that no longer matches what is happening inside you, of wanting to talk about what you are sensing, what you are perceiving, what you are beginning to believe is moving in your life, and not having a person in your immediate circle who has the capacity to receive that conversation without either dismissing it or managing it into something smaller and safer than what it actually is. That loneliness is real, and it is not a permanent condition. It is a temporary feature of the threshold position, and it will change as the Kairos moment arrives and draws toward you The people who are calibrated for the season you are entering rather than the season you are leaving. You have also been feeling, and I want to name this one carefully because it is the most easily misread of all the feelings in this season. A growing sense of readiness that coexists uncomfortably with a lingering sense of unworthiness. A part of you that knows, with a certainty that surprises you when you let yourself feel it fully, that you are ready for what is coming. That the preparation has been thorough enough. That the cord is strong enough. That you have been in this season long enough to have built what the next season requires. And alongside that knowing, almost in the same breath, a quieter voice that asks whether you are actually allowed to believe that. Whether the readiness is real or constructed. Whether the certainty is faith or presumption. That tension between readiness and unworthiness is not a sign of confusion. It is the sign of a chosen one standing at the exact threshold between one season and the next. The readiness is real. The unworthiness is the residue of the season you are leaving. And you do not have to resolve the tension before you step forward. You step forward, and the stepping itself resolves it. Now, let me be specific about what is coming, not in vague spiritual language, in the language of the three areas of your actual life that are about to experience the most significant movement. The first area is your relationships. And I need you to hear what I am about to say without resistance, because it will initially sound like loss before it reveals itself as liberation. Some of the people who are currently in your life are going to leave it. Not because they are bad people. Not because you did anything wrong. Not because the relationship failed in any conventional sense. But because the season you are entering requires a different kind of company than the season you are leaving, and the people who were assigned to walk with you through the wilderness are not all assigned to walk with you into the promised land. Some of them were sent specifically for the desert season, and when the desert season ends, their assignment ends with it. This departure, when it happens, will not always feel clean. It will not always feel mutual. Some of it will feel like rejection, like abandonment, like another loss layered on top of all the losses the waiting season already produced. But if you can hold what you learned about Kairos time in the previous part of this message, you will be able to see it for what it is. A repositioning, a clearing of the path, a divine logistics operation that is making room in your life for the people who are calibrated for what you are walking into. And those people are already moving towards you. I want you to hear that specifically. You have not yet met all of the significant people in your next season. Some of them are in motion right now, being redirected from their own previous paths toward the intersection point that has been appointed for you both. They will not arrive with a label. They will not announce themselves as the person sent for your next chapter. But you will know them by the way the conversation feels, by the way your frequency responds to their presence, by the way being around them does not deplete you, but instead reminds you of who you actually are at your fullest. New people are coming, and they are coming specifically, not accidentally, not incidentally, but because the same God who positioned you in the waiting season is now positioning the right people at the right access points of your emerging life. Do not settle the relationship questions of your next season with the people from your last one. Wait for the ones who are on the way. The second area is your purpose, and specifically, the question that has been sitting in you for what feels like longer than you can remember, the question of what you are actually supposed to be doing with what you carry. That question, the one you have circled 100 times, without landing on an answer that felt complete enough to act on, is about to answer itself. Not through a dramatic revelation, not through a vision or a sign that is impossible to miss, through one small and very clear step that will present itself in your ordinary daily life with a specificity and a clarity that you will not be able to argue with. One step, not the whole map, not the complete picture of the next 10 years. One step, clear enough to take, specific enough to trust, and perfectly sized for exactly where you are in the season. Take that step when it appears. Do not wait for the second and third steps to be visible before you move on the first one. The map reveals itself one step at a time, and the second step only becomes visible from the position of having taken the first. The answer to the question of your purpose is not going to arrive as a document. It is going to arrive as a next right action. And when it does, the feeling that accompanies it will not be the thunderous certainty you have been waiting for. It will be a quiet and unarguable rightness, a sense of yes that lives beneath all the noise. That is the signal. When you feel that quiet yes move, the third area is your resources and your opportunities. And this is the one where I need you to pay the closest attention, because the pattern you have been operating in regarding resources and opportunities has been shaped by a season that required you to fight for everything, to justify your presence, to prove your value, to work twice as hard for half the recognition, to make a case for yourself in rooms that were not designed to receive you. That pattern was a feature of the season you are leaving. It is not a feature of the season you are entering. What is coming does not require you to fight your way in. What is coming is going to find you. The opportunities that are appointed for the next season of your life are not going to require you to chase them down or convince anyone of your worthiness to receive them. They are going to arrive through channels you did not expect, from directions you were not watching, in forms you may not initially recognize as the thing you were believing for. And the distinguishing characteristic of an appointed opportunity versus an opportunity you manufactured through striving is this: the appointed opportunity carries a peace with it, not the peace of easy or comfortable, but the peace of rightness. The sense that this fits in a way that nothing in the previous season quite fit. That is what you are looking for, not the biggest opportunity, not the loudest opportunity, the one that carries peace. Here is what I need you to hear about what not to do during this period, because the transition between the wilderness season and the emerging season is one of the most vulnerable windows in a chosen one's journey. Do not make permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. The emotions of this threshold period are real, but they are also transitional, which means they are shifting more rapidly than usual, and they are not always a reliable guide to the decisions that will shape the next chapter. Do not announce your emergence before it has fully arrived. The people who underestimated you do not need a preview. They will receive the full picture soon enough, and it will speak more powerfully than anything you could say in advance. Do not go back. When the old season calls you back through the voice of familiarity or the voice of fear, do not interpret that call as wisdom. Interpret it as the final resistance of a season that does not want to let you go. And do not wait for permission. The people who were supposed to validate you in the previous season did not give you what you needed. The people in the next season will not be able to give it to you either, because the validation you are looking for is not something another person can confer. It was placed inside you before you were born. And what the next season requires is for you to operate from that internal knowing, rather than waiting for an external confirmation that the season of waiting already proved you cannot rely on. Something is coming in your relationships. Something is coming in your sense of purpose. Something is coming in the way resources and opportunities find you. And the something that is coming is not small. It is not a modest improvement on what you have been living. It is a shift significant enough to make the length of the waiting feel, in retrospect, not like too long, but like exactly long enough to build the cord, strong enough to hold it. If you feel that hum in your chest right now, if something in what I have just described has landed in a place that feels less like new information and more like confirmation of something you already knew, I want you to type the word receive in the comments section right now. Let that be your declaration that you are open, that you are no longer bracing, that you are standing at the threshold with your hands open rather than your arms crossed. Type the word receive and let the chosen ones, gathering in the comment section of this video, witness your declaration together, because you are not in this alone. And the community of the emerging is more real and more present than you know. Everything we have named together in this message, the grief of what was taken, the science of what you carry, the ancient language of appointed time, the 3 areas that are about to shift, all of it has been moving toward this moment, this particular part of the message. Because everything before this was about identifying where you have been and what is coming. And this part is about identifying who you are now, not who you were at the beginning of the waiting season, not who you will be when the emergence is complete and the Chronos evidence finally catches up with the Kairos reality, but who you are right now, standing at the threshold, in this exact body, in this exact season, with everything the waiting has built into you, and everything the promise is pulling out of you simultaneously. Because the person standing at the threshold is not the same person who entered the wilderness, and the name that belongs to who you are now is not the name the wilderness gave you. It is the name that was always waiting for you on the other side of what you survived. The name I want to give you today is this: you are a pathfinder. And I want to explain what that means with enough specificity that it does not remain a beautiful word floating above your actual life, but instead lands in the concrete reality of who you are and what you carry, and why the season you have been through was always going to produce exactly this person and not a different one. A pathfinder is not simply someone who found their own way through difficulty. That description, while not inaccurate, is far too thin to contain what you actually are. A pathfinder is a person who moves through terrain that has no existing road, not because they are reckless or because they failed to find the established path, but because the established path was never designed to lead where they are called to go. The places a pathfinder is sent to do not have roads yet. They do not have maps. They do not have the testimony of someone who went before and came back to report what they found. The pathfinder goes first, and in going first, through terrain that is unmarked and uncharted, and that offers none of the comfort of a well-worn trail, they leave something behind them that is more valuable than anything they carry with them. They leave a path, a visible, walkable, followable path that everyone who comes after them will use without ever fully understanding what it cost, the one who made it. This is who you are. This is what the wilderness season was making you into. Every year of waiting that felt like nothing was happening was actually a year of you moving through unmarked terrain, through the kind of interior landscape that does not appear on any existing map, learning the ground by walking it, learning the obstacles by encountering them, learning where the solid footing is by finding the places where the ground gives way, and every step of that interior journey, painful and disorienting as it was leaving a trail. Not for you. You were not the one who needed the trail. You were the one making it. The trail was being made for everyone who comes after you, everyone in your family line, everyone in your sphere of influence, everyone who will one day sit across from you or listen to your voice or read something you wrote and find, in the specific texture of your experience, the exact guidance they needed to navigate a terrain that would have been impassable without the path you made. This is why the people who underestimated you could not see what they were looking at. Because what they were looking at was a pathfinder in the middle of unmarked terrain. And from the outside, a person moving through unmarked terrain looks lost. It looks slow. It looks inefficient compared to the people walking the established roads with their established timelines and their established metrics of progress. What the observers on the established road cannot see is that the person in the unmarked terrain is not lost. They are pioneering. And the difference between lost and pioneering is not visible from a distance. It is only visible in retrospect, when the path has been completed and the people who called you lost are standing at the entrance of a road that did not exist before you walked it. You did not fall behind, you went first. And going first always looks like falling behind to the people who are following the roads that already exist. Now I want to take you somewhere. I want to lead you through a visualization that I need you to engage with as fully as you are able, not as a performance, not as an intellectual exercise, but as an actual experience of where you are right now in the geography of your own life. Picture yourself standing at a threshold, not a metaphorical threshold, but a physical one, a doorway. The frame of it is solid and old, worn smooth at the edges by the hands of time, standing at the boundary between two different kinds of terrain. You are standing in the opening of that doorway, and your feet are positioned exactly at the line where one space ends and another begins. One foot is still connected to the ground behind you. One foot is already touching the ground ahead. Turn around for a moment. Look back at the space behind you. Do not look away from it. Do not soften what you see. Let yourself see it clearly and completely. See the years of it. See the terrain of the waiting season spread out behind you in all its difficulty and all its specificity. See the unmarked ground you moved through when there was no trail to follow and no one ahead of you to tell you where the solid footing was. See the places where you fell and got back up without anyone watching. See the places where you stood completely alone in the middle of terrain so unfamiliar that you could not have described it to another person if you had tried. See the cost of it, the loneliness of being the first, the disorientation of having no map, the exhaustion of making a path while simultaneously surviving the terrain you were making it through. And then, without minimizing any of it, without pretending it was easy or that the years of it did not leave marks on you that you are still carrying, let yourself see what was also being created back there in all of that difficulty. See the path. Look behind you and see, for the first time perhaps with this kind of clarity, the trail that your movement through that unmarked ground has left. See it stretching back through all the years of the wilderness season, visible and solid and real. A path that did not exist before you and that exists now because you walked it. See the person who will stand at the beginning of that path and be able to move through terrain that would have been impassable without you. See the child in your family line who will never have to navigate the particular darkness you navigated because you moved through it first and left them away. See the stranger whose life will be changed by the specific testimony of a pathfinder who went first and came back with a report from terrain they have never seen. See, all of it, hold it for a breath, and then gently, without hurry, turn back to face forward. Now look at the space ahead of you, and here is what I need you to notice. You cannot see all of it. The full picture of what lies ahead is not visible from the threshold. That is not a failure of your vision. That is a feature of the threshold position. The threshold is not designed to give you the complete view. It is designed to give you enough. And what you can see from here, if you look with the eyes of a pathfinder who has been moving through unmarked terrain for long enough to know how to read the ground beneath their feet, is something you have not seen in the spaces behind you. You can see that the ground ahead is different, not easier necessarily, not without its own terrain to navigate, but different in a specific and important way. The ground ahead is ground that has been prepared for your arrival. The ground ahead has been waiting for a pathfinder with exactly your specific combination of experience and endurance and depth and calling. And unlike the ground behind you, which required you to figure out every step in real time, with no preparation and no guidance, the ground ahead is ground that was designed for someone who has already done what you have done. It was designed for you, and it fits in a way that nothing in the previous season quite fit. And now, I need you to notice the most important thing of all. You are already standing at the threshold. You are not on the way to the threshold. You are not almost at the threshold. You are not in the final preparation phase before the threshold becomes accessible to you. You arrived at the threshold in this moment, in this message, in the specific encounter between what you have been carrying and what these words have been naming for you. The threshold is not ahead of you, it is beneath your feet. You are standing in it right now, and the only movement required to cross from one side to the other is the one you have already been making throughout everything we have spoken about together in this message. The movement of choosing to believe what your spirit has always known over what your circumstances have consistently presented. The movement of standing in the tension between the readiness and the unworthiness and stepping forward anyway. The movement of a pathfinder who knows that the path is made by walking and not by waiting for the walking conditions to become perfect. You have been a pathfinder through the hardest terrain. You are still a pathfinder at the threshold, and you will be a pathfinder in everything that lies ahead. The difference is that from this point forward, you will know that is what you are, and a pathfinder who knows what they are does not move through the terrain the same way a pathfinder who is still trying to figure out why the established road does not seem to apply to them. Knowing changes the movement. Knowing changes the posture. Knowing changes the way you interpret the unmarked ground ahead, from disorienting to purposeful, from frightening to chosen, from evidence of being lost to evidence of going first. Now I want to speak a blessing over you before this part of the message closes. And I want it to be specific rather than general, because you are a specific person with a specific assignment and a specific path that no one else is walking and no one else was built to walk. May the path you have made through the wilderness season be recognized, first by you and then by everyone who walks it after you. May the endurance that the unmarked terrain built into you become the most reliable instrument you carry into every new territory ahead. May the people who are coming towards you, the ones appointed for your next season, recognize you when they arrive, and may you recognize them. May the one clear step that is about to present itself in the area of your purpose arrive, with enough peace and enough specificity that you cannot argue with it and do not delay it. May the resources and opportunities that are appointed for your name find you without requiring you to fight your way to them. And may you walk across this threshold, the one you are standing at right now, with the full and unhesitating confidence of a pathfinder who knows that the ground ahead was made for exactly the person the wilderness season made you into. You are not lost. You never were. You were always making the path, and the path is ready, and so are you. You are still standing at that threshold, and I want you to stay there for just a moment longer before we talk about what your feet actually need to do next. Because there is a particular temptation that visits chosen ones at exactly this point in the journey, at the moment when the message has landed, when the naming has happened, when something inside has shifted enough to feel real and different and true. The temptation is to let the feeling be the action, to let the internal movement substitute for the external one, to walk away from this moment having felt something profound and changed nothing in the actual architecture of your daily life. And I refuse to let that happen to you today, not because feeling is not valuable. It is. The shift that happened in you during the visualization in the previous part of this message was real, and it matters. But feeling without a corresponding movement in the physical world is a seed that was planted but never watered. And a pathfinder who has spent years in the wilderness building the capacity for exactly this moment does not deserve to have that capacity remain theoretical. You deserve the concrete. You deserve the specific. You deserve to walk away from this message with something in your hands that you can actually do today, in the life you are actually living, with the body you are actually inhabiting. So this part of the message is entirely practical. No more ancient language, though the ancient language was necessary and true. No more visualizations, though the visualization was necessary and real. Just 3 areas of your life that are about to transform, described with enough specificity that you will recognize the movement when it arrives, and paired with actions you can take right now, today, before this message is 24 hours behind you, that will position you to receive what moving toward you, rather than accidentally blocking it with the habits and postures of the season you are leaving. The first area is your relationships, and the practical action that belongs to this area is one of the most counterintuitive things I am going to ask you to do, because it runs directly against the survival instincts that the waiting season installed in you. Here it is. I want you to identify one person in your current life, just one, who has consistently seen something in you that you have not always been able to see in yourself. Not a flatterer, not someone who simply tells you what you want to hear, but someone who has looked at you in your actual messy and unfinished and still in process state and reflected back to you a version of yourself that was larger and truer and more specific than the version the waiting season kept showing you. And I want you to reach out to that person today, not with a long explanation, not with a full account of everything this message said to you, just a simple and honest acknowledgement. Something like, I have been thinking about you and I wanted you to know that the way you have seen me has mattered more than I have told you. That is it. No agenda beyond the acknowledgement itself. I am asking you to do this for 2 reasons. The first reason is that Pathfinder entering their next season needs to consciously identify and strengthen the connections that are calibrated for where they are going, rather than where they have been. And the person who has consistently seen you clearly is almost certainly a person who is assigned to the next season, rather than only the last one. The second reason is that the act of reaching out, of choosing connection over the protective withdrawal that the waiting season normalized, is itself a declaration to your own nervous system that the season of isolation is ending. Your body needs to participate in the transition, not just your spirit. And one genuine act of relational vulnerability, however small, tells your body something that no amount of internal revelation can tell it as effectively. Tells you that it is safe to open again, that the terrain has changed, that the posture of protection that kept you safe in the wilderness is no longer the posture required for the territory you are entering. As the old relationships complete their assignments and the new ones begin to arrive, you will notice a specific quality in the people who are coming for your next season. They will not require you to be smaller to make them comfortable. They will not ask you to edit the size of your vision to fit the dimensions of their own. They will not respond to the full weight of what you carry with discomfort or with the kind of quiet management that turns your dream into something safer and less demanding. They will meet the full weight of what you carry with a corresponding weight of their own. And the combination of what you each bring will produce something that neither of you could have built alone. Watch for that quality. It is the distinguishing mark of a relationship that was appointed for your next season rather than assigned to your last one. The second area is your purpose, and the practical action that belongs to this area requires you to do something that your analytical mind is going to resist. Because your analytical mind has been in charge of the purpose question for long enough that it has developed a very strong opinion about what it would take to finally answer it. Your analytical mind believes that the answer to the purpose question requires more information, more certainty, more external validation, more evidence that the step you are considering is the right one before you take it. And I am going to ask you to override that belief with a single, specific, and immediately actionable practice. Tonight, before you sleep, I want you to take a piece of paper or open a blank document and write at the top of the page the following question. If I already knew what I was supposed to do next and I was not afraid of being wrong, what would I do? And then I want you to write for 10 minutes without stopping, without editing, without going back to read what you have written, and without allowing your analytical mind to evaluate any of it until the 10 minutes are complete. Just write. Let whatever comes, come. Let the thing that you already know, but have been afraid to commit to paper arrive in the writing. Let the step that has been presenting itself quietly at the edges of your awareness for longer than you want to admit finally be written down where you can see it. When the 10 minutes are finished, read what you wrote and find the one sentence in it that makes your chest feel both frightened and alive at the same time. That is the sentence. That is the step. That specific combination of fear and aliveness is the neurological signature of a pathfinder standing at the edge of the unmarked terrain they were built to navigate. It is not comfortable. It was never going to be comfortable. But it is right, and right for a chosen one who has been in preparation long enough to know the difference between right and easy is sufficient reason to move. Do not commit to the whole map tonight. Commit to the sentence. Write it somewhere you will see it tomorrow morning. And then take one action, however small, however preliminary, however much it feels like it does not count as a real step in the direction of that sentence. One email sent, one phone call made, one document opened, one conversation initiated, one application started, one idea shared with the one person who has consistently seen you clearly. One step taken today. Direction of the sentence that made you both frightened and alive. That is your purpose practice for right now. Not a 5-year plan, not a complete strategic roadmap. One sentence and one step. And the Pathfinder in you already knows what both of them are. The third area is your resources and your opportunities. And the practical action that belongs to this area is perhaps the simplest of the three, but also the one that requires the most significant internal shift to execute properly, because the action itself is not complicated. The internal shift required to do it without reverting to the old pattern is the work. Here is the action. For the next 7 days, Every time an opportunity presents itself, every time a door appears, every time resource arrives from an unexpected direction, or a connection offers itself through an unfamiliar channel, before you evaluate it, before you analyze it, before you run it through the filter of whether it is realistic, or whether you deserve it, or whether the timing is right, I want you to ask one question and one question only. Does this carry peace? Not does this feel comfortable? Not does this make logical sense from where I am currently standing? Not does this match the version of the opportunity I have been picturing for the last several years? Just this. Does this carry peace? Because the appointed opportunities of the next season are not going to arrive looking exactly like what you have been picturing. They are going to arrive looking like something you could not have fully anticipated, because they are being sent from a dimension of your future that your current vantage point does not have full visibility into. What they will carry, every single one of the appointed ones, is a peace that is distinct from the anxiety that the unappointed opportunities, the ones you would have to manufacture and fight for and justify your way into, produce. The peace is the signal. It is subtle. It is quiet. It does not shout. But when you have been in the wilderness long enough to know the difference between the feeling of striving and the feeling of receiving, you will not miss it. And for the next 7 days, peace is the only filter you need. Now I want to speak specifically to the resources question, because this is the area where the waiting season has done some of its most persistent damage to your self-concept. The years of not having enough, of watching resources go to people who seem to need them less, or deserve them less, or steward them less carefully than you would have installed in you a scarcity orientation that operates below the level of your conscious theology. You can believe in abundance with your mind while your body is still operating from the posture of someone who expects to not have enough. And the body will win that argument every time, because the body is faster than the mind, and its patterns run deeper than any belief you can articulate. The practice for this area is a daily declaration, spoken out loud, in the same way that you practice the statement in the return protocol from part 3 of this message. The declaration is this: what is appointed for me is already moving toward me, and I do not have to chase it. Say that every morning for 7 days. Say it before your analytical mind has fully woken up and begun its daily inventory of what is still missing. Say it in the tender window between sleep and full wakefulness when your nervous system is most open to receiving a new instruction about how to orient itself toward the day. Say it until your body begins to believe it alongside your mind. And then watch, with genuine and patient attention, what begins to arrive through channels you were not watching, from directions you were not tracking, in forms you could not have predicted, but that carry, unmistakably, the peace of something that was always on its way to you. 3 areas, 3 practical actions, 1 genuine reach toward the person who has seen you clearly, 1 10-minute writing practice that ends with a sentence and a step, 1 7-day practice of filtering every arriving opportunity through the single question of whether it carries peace. These are not complicated. They are not demanding. They do not require resources you do not have, or conditions you have not yet created. They require only the intention of a chosen one who has decided that the threshold is not a place to remain but a place to cross. And you have already made that decision. You made it the moment you showed up here. You made it the moment you kept listening through the grief and the naming and the science and the ancient language and the visualization. You made it because you are a pathfinder who already knows, somewhere beneath all the analysis and all the doubt, that the path ahead was made for exactly the person the wilderness season built. And that person is ready, not almost ready, not nearly ready, ready. What is yours is already moving toward you. The relationships are repositioning. The purpose is clarifying. The resources and opportunities are arriving through channels that are already open. And the only thing left for you to do right now, in this moment, before anything else, is to take the next step in the direction of the sentence that made you both frightened and alive. Because the path is not made by standing at the threshold. The path is made by walking. And you, beloved Pathfinder, were built for exactly this walk. We are at the end of this message together. And before I say anything else, I want to do something that I hope lands in the specific place inside you that has been the hardest to reach throughout everything we have spoken about today. I want to thank you, not in the way that people thank an audience for their time, or their attention, or their willingness to sit through something long. I want to thank you in a more specific and more honest way than that. I want to thank the part of you that showed up here today despite having every reasonable reason not to. The part of you that clicked play even though you have heard messages before that, promised to name what you were carrying, and then fell short of the thing they promised. The part of you that kept listening through the grief section, through the part that named the cost of the waiting years without softening it, through the visualization, through the practical steps, through all of it, even when some of what was said landed in places that were tender and not entirely comfortable. That part of you, the part that showed up anyway, that kept listening anyway, that stayed present through the discomfort anyway, is the part of you that has been carrying the weight of this entire season. And it deserves to be thanked directly and without qualification, because that part of you is not small, it is not naive, it is not the desperate part reaching for something to believe in, because the alternative is too hard to sit with. It is the most honest and most enduring part of you. It is the part that has known, through every season of contradiction and every accumulation of evidence that seemed to point in the wrong direction, that something was true about you that had not yet been confirmed by your circumstances. And the fact that part of you is still intact, still present, still willing to show up to a message like this one after everything the waiting season has taken, is not a small thing. It is extraordinary. And I do not want to move past it without saying so clearly. You are not alone in this. I want you to hear that in the most concrete way possible, not as a comfort phrase, but as a statement of actual fact. Right now, as you are receiving the final part of this message, there are chosen ones all across the world, sitting in their own version of what you have been sitting in. Some of them are in different time zones, listening to these same words in the early morning hours before their household wakes up. Some of them are in countries whose names you may never know, carrying a version of the same calling in a completely different cultural context, wading through a version of the same wilderness in a language that sounds nothing like yours. Some of them are older than you and have been in the waiting season longer than you have. Some of them are younger and are just entering the terrain you are now preparing to leave. And all of them, every single one, found their way to this message through the same combination of longing and guidance, and the particular grace that leads a chosen one to exactly the word they need at exactly the moment they need it. You are in a room that is far more populated than it looks from the inside of your own waiting season. And the community of the chosen, the people who carry the frequency, the people who are being assembled for a purpose that the world around them has not yet had the capacity to fully receive. That community is real, and it is present, and You are already a part of it. Now I want to invite you to do one final thing before you carry this message into the rest of your day, or your evening, or your night. I want you to do something physical with what you have been carrying. Not metaphorically physical, actually physical. I want you to imagine, with as much sensory detail as you can bring to the exercise, that everything you walked in with today, all of the weight of the waiting season, the grief of what was taken, the exhaustion of the unmarked terrain, the loneliness of going first, the specific and accumulated heaviness of having carried something enormous in silence for too long. I want you to imagine that all of it has a physical form. It might look like a bag. It might look like a stone. It might look like a garment you have been wearing for so long you forgot it was not your skin. Whatever form it takes in your imagination, I want you to see yourself holding it. Feel the weight of it in your hands or on your shoulders, or wherever your body places it naturally. Let yourself feel how heavy it actually is, because you have been so accustomed to carrying it that you may have stopped registering the weight as weight. Feel it fully for one breath, and then I want you to set it down at the threshold. Not throw it away, not pretend it did not exist or did not cost you what it cost you. Just set it down deliberately, with intention, at the threshold you have been standing at throughout this entire message. Leave it there, not because the experiences it represents were not real, but because the pathfinder who is crossing this threshold does not need to carry the weight of the wilderness into the territory that comes next. The wisdom that the wilderness built into you comes with you. The strength that the unmarked terrain produced in you comes with you. The depth and the capacity and the specific combination of endurance and sensitivity that makes you exactly the right person for exactly the path ahead, all of that comes with you. But the weight of it, the accumulated heaviness of having carried it without acknowledgement for too long, that you can leave at the threshold. It has served its purpose, and you are allowed to cross without it. If this message has met you in a real place today, if something in it has shifted something in you that needed to shift, I want to ask you gently to do 3 things before you move on with your day. The first is to like this video, not as a transaction, but as a small act of acknowledgement that this message was worth the time you gave it, and that its continued presence in the world matters to you. The second is to share it with one person, just one, the chosen one in your life who is in their own waiting season, who is carrying their own version of the weight you just set down at the threshold, who has not yet had someone name what they are carrying with enough specificity to make it feel witnessed. You do not need to explain why you are sending it. Just send it. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a pathfinder can do for the person behind them on the trail is simply mark the way. The third thing I want to ask is that you consider subscribing to this channel if you have not already, so that the next message, and the one after that, and the one after that, can find you without requiring you to search for it. Because the message that this one opened in you is not a one-time event. It is the beginning of a conversation that your season requires, and that this channel is committed to continuing. And if you feel moved to support this work financially, if you want to be part of making sure that this message reaches the chosen one who is going to need it next week in a moment harder than the one you are in right now, the donation link is in the description below. Not for me. So that the message keeps moving. So that the next pathfinder who is standing at the threshold of their own wilderness season finds what you found here today. And one final thing. If the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, if the section about theta and gamma frequencies and the 7-minute protocol landed in you as something more than information, If something in you recognized it as a tool that belongs in the hands of a pathfinder entering their next season, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. The link is there. The 90-day guarantee is there. And the $39 access point is there. For as long as it remains available, you do not have to decide right now. But if you know it is a yes, do not let the threshold moment pass without taking the step that belongs to it. You came here today carrying something heavy. You are leaving with something you did not have when you arrived. Not just a feeling, a name for who you are, a language for the time you are in, a practice for the frequency you were built to access, and a path that was always going to lead you here, to this threshold, to this moment, to the first step of the season that everything before it was preparing you to walk into. Go now. Cross the threshold. Make the path. You were built for exactly this. You have walked through something real today. And before you go, I want to leave one thing with you that is not information and not instruction and not an invitation to do anything at all. Just a mark. A quiet word spoken over you as you carry this message back into your ordinary life and let it do what it was sent to do. May you be found by everything that was appointed for your name. May the people who were sent for your next season recognize you when they arrive, and may you recognize them. May the path you make through the unmarked terrain ahead be walked by people who will never know your name, but whose lives will be different because you went first. May you sleep tonight with a body that is slightly less braced than it was this morning. And may you wake tomorrow as what you have always been, a chosen one, a pathfinder, a person whose waiting was never delay but always assembly, standing at the beginning of a path that the whole of heaven has been watching you. Become ready to walk. You are seen, you are known, you are not behind, you are exactly on time. Go well.